Now I'd like to welcome our last speaker, Dr. Ramakrishnamani. Welcome, sir. So you're on mute at the moment. Still on mute. Yeah, now we can hear.
Just share my screen. Hopefully, it's the right screen. What you guys are looking at?
Oh, it is the PowerPoint slide. Yeah, it's the right screen.
Is it full screen?
Yeah, it's full screen.
Okay. Oh, thank you for the introduction, Saurabh, and fantastic data, kind of introspection from the previous colleagues around this barriers and facilitators, in terms of having evidence of research and in terms of the barriers around conducting research from Salman and kind of having a direct experience in working at multiple levels from Sudha. So the disclaimer is, I don't have any experience conducting research in India. So then I was just thinking and reflecting on what to talk. It's just my opinions, which I feel like not good. Then I took a research approach just to go and look up what are the common barriers and facilitators in developing countries, and in particular in India too. So I got few data, which is common themes which John had mentioned and Sudha has touched upon, and some of the deeper intricacies what Salman had indicated. This paper, Chorcho paper, which is kind of really helping to understand what the current context or reasonable context around 2018, which John clearly covered around the individual and then access resources and couple of 4 themes, what he had indicated. So what I see this is the key component, what I feel is a barrier with that kind of a data is a lack of skilled research staff and a lack of research leaders. It's not pertaining to particular institute or anything in general. We are thinking of India. So we need to be having not by examples, we need to be looking at a broader context. So I feel it's true from my end on specific that skilled involved in conducting and high quality research. And when I look at the second category around this ethical and regulatory thing is one of the highlight in qualitative studies looked at as unskilled authorities, which puts an enormous pressure on researchers to facilitate research instead of facilitating kind of having a barriers around controlling these regulatory systems. More interestingly, looking at as an environment where we all work, it is not conducive an atmosphere in terms of conducting research. And John touched upon the research culture of the university, how the department, how your peers and colleagues, how research is seen or escape from the routine duties or something contributing to the professional demands. And I don't want to get into the theory behind operational barriers, which I don't have any direct experience, so I don't have really a reflection on that. But I can definitely see the competing demands, which is so critical to develop any scholarship, either whatever you wanted to focus on. There is no lack of protected time for research, and 100% I agree, which is because other competing and competing priorities, either clinical practice and teaching, everything has to be done, and research has to be done, meeting the policy of the university or the hospital, whatever. So this is an interesting piece of research. I looked at around this barriers in conducting 2 medical institutes. Then I thought, oh, I got some direct data, people talking about 500 people surveying and doing all this data from AIIMS, and they compared with the University College of Medical Sciences. As you see, the teaching primary activity in AIIMS, if you look at when compared to this UCMS, the research, obviously the primary activity for AIIMS, sorry, there's a bit of animation issue. And the teaching is predominantly looking at AIIMS has got a smaller proportion when compared to the UCMS. And if you look at the healthcare services, which is of a priority for the AIIMS when compared to the UCMS. And if you look at it, reflects a sort of the number of papers coming from AIIMS and UCMS. So that's kind of an interesting, and UCMS adds 6.57 times more barriers to health research than AIMS. So there's colleagues reporting a lot of barriers, as John listed and Sudha listed and someone listed, which is some kind of interesting insight. So I see a lot of barriers are talking about this from this paper, which I saw it's a real data coming from a an institute which is of an eminence, and another institute which is maybe a developing institute around that. So if you look at, for me, the skill is doing research and the technology from the personal barriers, which is seen as both as a barrier and a facilitator, depend on the institute. Okay, so the AIMS has got a skills and the UCMS has got as a CSS barrier. So that's quite interesting parts. If you see some of the green, what talked about John, the faculty interest and the motivation to do the work. So that's kind of what drives primarily research too. So forth. I don't want to get into.
Sir, yep. We just have 20 seconds more.
Brilliant. So there's a lot of data. I strongly recommend you to look into that multiple aspects, which I feel like really, really good reflection and the real data done from 600 colleagues. So we need to trust this data, you see. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you, sir. That was really insightful, and having some data from real research experience and all of that really echoed with what experience I had when I was researching back home. All of it makes quite sense. So at this point, I'd like to pause and take a moment if there are any questions from the rest of the panel, and if there are any questions from the audience. Do we have any questions? Because I cannot see on my screen.
No, sir, they would be raising their hand if they want to ask a question. So if you're open for questions, we can go ahead with the...
Yeah, sure. Sure. So I do have some backup questions. I'd again like to thank all the speakers, which was all brilliant. Could everybody join me in thanking all the speakers? Because I was really cheering everybody up, and I was really appreciating all the barriers and facilitator from my own experience as well. So I do have another a question for the team. So the first question that I had on the list was, as a researcher, what are the barriers that you face as a researcher to publish? Are there publishing related barriers when you publish articles from India? Are there any barriers? I think it's a relevant question for Dr. John and Dr. Soman.
Yeah, I'll begin with probably this. I would probably limit to three main ones, though there are many. From a personal experience itself, the first and foremost, I feel, including myself, and I would vouch for many of my colleagues, is the language barrier. From in India, when we are trained for a system where we don't learn to write it in a scientific way. So scientific writing, and even though you know English, the English that you speak is different, and the way you write is different. And many in the initial parts, when we send papers, we used to get rejection just based on language. So one component I feel is to get trained for scientific writing. That was one challenge to get published. Second was, I would say, about the cost of publishing in open access, good impact channels, and we don't have funds to support, though there are minimal funds. If you see the cost that is involved right now in publishing some of the very good open access journals is extremely high, so it's difficult. The third point is, I feel many of the researchers that I have seen also have this inhibition about publishing their research. They somehow feel that they are probably is not good enough to be published. The confidence to say, yeah, I did a good work. When we see Western studies where they do small data and the way they project, Indian researchers somehow take a step back and somehow are not confident enough to go ahead and publishing their research. So these three is the ones I think I would maybe solve.
Thank you, John, sir. I think that was really insightful. Soman, sir, did you want to add something on?
Yes, Dr. John has listed out many of the relevant points. One, we do not have English as a primary language. So what we express and what we speak and what we write, all three goes in different directions. Two, we always look for something big. We want to share information when we have something big, but perfection is a myth. And we need to, whatever small things you do, and if it makes an impact on your research community, your patients, I think that should be communicated. Three, we should be, you have to decide where do you want to publish. If you want to publish because you have a larger audience working on that particular disease, probably you should forget about Q1, Q2, Q3 journals or Scopus Index journals, and probably you should disseminate the information as you deem fit. Two, universities are pushing upon publication in Scopus Index journals to increase their ranking. Again, you might aim for Q1, Q2, Q3, and you may not land up in any of those. So you end up with some PubMed indexed or national database kind of thing. Then the fourth thing I would think of is Western population, where the publication happens, they do not understand the barriers or challenges of middle income countries, low income countries, because they have got a lot of questions. How did you manage to do all this stuff? First question is, we don't understand that. I have experience with one of the articles in Cerebral Palsy where we had done work on outdoor ambulation. They do not have the concept of outdoor ambulation on rough surfaces. So they asked for more information. Once they were satisfied with it, then probably then they decided that they should go ahead with it. These are some of the barriers for publication. Again, we should share our objectives first with the working group, and then probably we should take inputs from everybody else, and then we should start publication in groups. So probably that will help us.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Somen sir and John sir, of course. I think the next question that I have is something that I always wanted to learn, and it would be wonderful if Ram sir or Dr. Sudha could add on this. So what are the strategies do you think would help improve quality of health research within India, based on your experience of working in more developed countries in the US and in New Zealand?
Yeah, do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, I think so. Please.
Okay. So I think one of the things which Dr. Mani had mentioned rightly was to sort of have time protected. And that was something which Dr. Somen also mentioned, that making sure that, like, for instance, in the US, there is a tenure track. So it's a research dedicated faculty line where there is protected time for research. So we do teaching, and there's always that struggle that what's the percentage of teaching versus research, but you are judged upon your productivity for research. And that's something which I want to tie in, even based on our previous discussion, that we need to incentivize the research line for students, for faculty. It should be a lucrative and a viable line that students need to think that, hey, I can be a clinician, but I can also go into the research line. It is a viable line for sure. And just increasing education relative to research, whether it's training related to stats, whether it's training related to how to write publications, how to review publications, that I think should be part of the education profile for physical therapy. And then also valuing interdisciplinarity. So giving sort of maybe internship opportunities in technology institutes, research facilities, even if there are short-term opportunities, so that there is a broadening of perspective that, physical therapy has applications in multiple areas of research, industry partnerships. There is a lot that we can do. It's just that sometimes the view that's presented is extremely narrow.
Yeah, but again, I can't agree more. I still remember researching. All my research work was past midnight, and there's no protected time at all. And much of that can be improved. And I see that things have been improving at Manipal and other universities, which is great. Ram sir, would you like to add something on this?
So some of the thoughts, I think this is a strategy talking about, and things what you could do, directly actioning. So when I see strategy, I think the key strategy is bringing that research culture in various ways. So research culture includes this skills what Sudha talked about, is strategy to build human resource or the build capacity to conduct research. So that kicks in you as early as possible from undergraduate to master's to PhD to, so getting that sorted is a key. I think there are a couple of research capacity building models out there, and people are kind of testing that hackathon model. Recently, I was looking at the ICMR is using a model to mentor new investigators to conduct health research in the mental area, which they call it as granathon model. So basically, there are a lot of models looking at focusing on research skills, how to ask right questions before even you publish and think about where is publishing, right questions which are local context. So that kind of capacity building is important. And centers which are having already research capacity should establish research groups, either interdisciplinary research groups across institutions. As a strategy, like you need to have a strategy looking at what are the research priorities. We need to look at the thrust areas for research impact. We need to come up with, as a country or as a state, what are the research priorities need to be handled which has got impact, and that to be targeted rather than doing random research without any research impact. It's not my personal interest. Research comes with the money and the time and resource and everything. What will be translated and providing impact? So that's a lot of effort is needed to get that priorities, and institutional level support or establishing a national support, a state support or institutional level research support is needed. As a strategy, we need to think about train the mentors. We need to have a mentorship training program, how to mentor researchers. The problem is we all learned our own and we don't know how to supervise, how to guide colleagues or junior research students. I think as a strategy, broad strategy, these are my thoughts. We could talk about the actions and other things maybe in the follow-up discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. I think that is wonderful discussion.
I have something to say. Dr. Mani has focused on building the right research question, but I think when we start teaching research, I think it should not be over asking right research questions. When you're teaching something, you have some hypothesis, allow the students to test it. Okay, so something like it can be weird, but then when students starts building models or building relationships, when they read something, when they experiment something, I think imposing research question on that instant becomes a little barrier, because the student has something in mind. Oh, I wanted to check this relationship, but then my guide or mentor is not allowing me. You have to choose some research question which has got an impact. It has to be in PICO framework. Then they lose all the zeal. Probably, we have to have some time frame for, like tinkering labs. You do whatever you want types, get some outcome, and then slowly you shift on. You have got less resources. Let's move on to focus question, which has impact on the population, impact on ranking of the university, etc. There should be some time frame for students to identify their skill set. Otherwise, directly jumping on PICO framework or directly jumping on you should have the right question, it just blocks the mind. When person is starting to develop, you teach skills in a graduated manner. So that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you, Dr. Soman. That's very interesting. I think based on this, as a chair, I'm not supposed to speak much, but I've been thinking about many things. But I'll directly jump on to the next question that I wanted to ask. So as researchers from developing countries or from low and middle income countries, we definitely have a lot of potential to teach researchers in high income countries, and the direction can be other way around as well. So we can also learn from high income countries as well. So I'd like to direct the next question to Dr. John Solomon. Based on your experience of working as a researcher, a clinician, and also teacher, what are just one thing that you think that researcher from high income countries can learn from low income countries?
That would be one thing would be to how to utilize do a good research with low resources. So there are some really good researchers that has come out, even in papers like Lancet, journals like Lancet, which are basically have not looked at a population need at community level and have a large population, but did not utilize too much of money, but still were able to produce a good research. So usually when we work out the budget sessions, I see they do budget a lot when we're having the high income country collaborators work. Whereas in low middle income countries, you will think in a different angle how to get the project done in a much a viable financial process, and that works for them, and they start learning. Okay, you can probably do this way also. So that is one of the thing I feel they learn eventually something that we can teach from our side.
Yeah, exactly. I totally echo with that as well. For just experience from my own research is that I had a small funding, $10,000 funding, of which I did like 3 or 4 different projects and 10 different papers. And now I'm working in Australia, and they talk about $1 million as a small funding. So it's quite surprising.
Exactly.
I'd like to direct the next question along the same line to either Dr. Ram or Dr. Sudha. Either of you could respond. If there is one thing that you appreciate that researchers from low-income countries can learn from high-income countries, what would that be?
Maybe I can start. So I would say that I have 2 things. So one is that the value of interdisciplinarity and it being okay that you don't know everything. You can collaborate with other people who have the expertise and draw upon their expertise to really make a good research plan and have a good study. And second would be to provide more startup funds or funds to new investigators to build their lab, to hire students, to purchase software, things that were identified as barriers. So if there could be more lobbying to get government or industry funding to give that kickstart or that boost to new researchers, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Again, I echo that it's so hard to say I don't know when you're working in low-income countries, and people would actually judge. And it's so common in high-income countries to say I don't know and learn from other people, which is great. Dr. Ram, do you have anything to add, or should I?
So just to clarify the question, a researcher from low-income, what that individual could learn from?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Good. It's probably around this research ethics of conducting research and doing altruistic to the research. I'm not putting a negative context in India or anything. It generally that happens for promotion or for anything that leads to a lot of issues could come around publishing and conducting research and doing research, and even research collaboration, how ethical we need to be having. In terms of the relationships, it's a lot more. It's not like this is better or that people are better. I'm not arguing. I think there is some amount of some kind of integrity happens in terms of research ethics. So that start from your master's research, how you do to PhD to whatever you do applying. That's something which we could learn around this frameworks and how that to be done. So that involves, in fact, all levels, multiple levels of research process. So that culture has to come, has to learn. And in terms of dedicating time on a day, couple of hours writing, it is a research culture that has to become into part of it, but there are barriers to do that. So people want to, but there are barriers. So something could learn that from would be helpful.
Yeah, perfect. And I think there are a lot of ignorance and differences about what the right ethics is between high and low income countries. And there's so much differences that we could chat for hours. So thank you, Dr. Sudha and Dr. Ram. The next question I wanted to, that is again my own personal interest, to learn about where should we focus our research for the next 5 or 10 years to improve health research in India. So this time I'd like to go with Dr. Soman, but could you please limit your answer to 1 sentence only, please, because we only have 3 more minutes and we have to wind.
That's the trouble. You can't, expect answers from me right to the point because I build narratives around it. I'm sorry. I think we should focus on thrust areas because that's where we are getting a lot of fundings. Okay. And for developing basic stuff, we should focus on the seed grants, which is provided by the universities. Okay. And use them
Perfect.
to write.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll have to stop you there, and I'll move with Dr. Sudha if you have any insights on where our focus should be for the next 5 or 10 years.
I would say that we want to build more interdisciplinary institutes, take Manipal as one of the models and try to build more interdisciplinary institutes and hire faculty who cut borders, who are interdisciplinary and who have training in multiple domains to sort of broaden the research vision for India.
Yeah, excellent. Now I think John, sir, is the next one on the line, and I'm very keen to learn what he has to say.
1 point means capacity building. We need to train from the student level onwards on research to how to do it, why should they do it, what's the importance of it. Inculcate that it's not just about gaining knowledge, but creating knowledge is a part of an education, and also to teach them how to do it. So that should be our next focus.
Yeah, that's truly genius, sir, and I think that's one area that we can work so much on. Thank you. And Dr. Ram?
The points what I added, I think already colleagues had mentioned. So
yeah.
One thing which in the next 10 years you could do is foster collaborations within India and with the developed world, or whatever high-income country, whatever you say. So to answer some of the research, identify research priorities and conduct research. So fostering research development through collaborations.
Perfect. I think that's wonderful and just right at time. And I've been having goosebumps while listening to everyone speak and how I echo with everybody. And also, I think it's the right time to end the session just 1 minute before. And I'd like to thank all the speakers and audience who've been lovely. And back to you, Dr. Rachana.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful session. I believe we have covered all the points, and everyone would be scratching their minds again with some new research questions. And yeah, so thank you everyone for joining, and you can enjoy rest of the conference and rest of the Sunday by logging into our virtual platform. Thank you, everyone.